this period of time that we're floating through on the planet right now is connected to a card that looks like this in a number of the decks that I have. The deck on the left-hand side of the screen shows you the Nine of Swords, which is the tarot key that connects to this specific period of time that we're rolling through right now. And on the left-hand side, the Nine of Swords is depicted from the traditional Rider-Waite deck that was published in 1910. On the right-hand side here, we have a variant of the same card, the Nine of Swords, depicted as the Nine of Air from the Osho Zen Tarot. And as you can see, they've given it this awful title of sorrow. Now, sometimes the energy of the nine could be seen as a tripling of an energy that's been building. It's a very powerful energy. Whatever that you call this energy, and sometimes I would describe it as sorrow. I would agree with Osho, and sometimes when I'm reading with different decks, the meaning becomes more nuanced or a little bit different. It's always got a nine of swordness about it. Sometimes the Nine of Sword can be described as sorrow. The nine, let me show you some other images of the Nine of Swords here while I describe what's going on. Here on the right hand side we see in the Thoth deck the title ascribed to the Nine of Swords becomes Cruelty, which sometimes hits the mark. On the left-hand side, we've got the Nine of Swords from a beautiful deck that's illustrated by one of my absolute favorite tarot illustrators of all time, Lisa Hunt. I highly recommend all of her tarot decks. They are just drop-dead gorgeous, amongst other things. And here in her fairy tale tarot, you see the Little Mermaid. And she is being well, she's basically having her voice taken, I believe, by the evil sea witch, and this is in exchange for legs, if I remember the fairy tale correctly. So the nine always depicts a gathering of energies, a tripling of gathering of energies, because a 3 is essentially gathering energy and 9 is 3 sets of 3. So there's so much energy in this card that whether we're looking at these alternative images here or we're looking at these sorts of images which are more traditional, we see a figure who can't sleep in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith image here. The energy has gotten so powerful that he can't sleep anymore. That's how powerful it is. It's keeping him up at night. He's holding his head in his hands, because where is all of this energy? It's in his head. It's in the realm of air. Sword energy is thought energy. This energy that the Little Mermaid is losing in this card is her voice. It is an energy to do with thought and communication and words. So when we see the Nine of Swords, it's usually a pretty scary, dim image. And right now, what we see in the world is very Nine of Swords sort of stuff with things that we have to find a way through. It's just, sort of stuff that's at intolerable levels and that we have to find a voice for or a decision for. We need to do something. And a lot of us have felt compelled to express our sympathy and condolences with the victims of some terror attacks that have happened very recently. For instance, that's a really good example. Now, energetically, there is a global thought energy that is connected with what is happening in the world right now. Globally, how many of us are thinking things about the level that this terrorism has gotten to? in our world, or the level that the dysfunction of, how informed we feel or how in control we feel. Something kind of has to give at this point. And something I have said for years when I teach the Nine of Swords, when it comes up in just a tarot reading, whether it's, connected to a period of time in the year or not, this card comes up for people in readings all the time. Anytime a person has an experience on a subconscious level that it's just almost too much to bear, and there's so much energy in that too much to bear thought that something has to shift. A deal is met, a decision is made that will, it has to change something, it has to bring closure. And that kind of feels like where a lot of people find themselves this week, quite frankly. So, the interesting thing is, as far as a forecast sort of portion of this masterclass, what I will have to say is the Nine of Swords energy is simply a vibration. And the really interesting thing about the Nine of Swords energy, as much as it's very often depicted in this way or this way, in ways that look kind of unpleasant, negative, these aren't nice experiences depicted on these cards, are they? Are they always bound to be these tragic, horrible things, these horrible experiences that we don't want? Is the Nine of Swords always an awful, awful card? Is every single time the Nine of Swords comes up in someone's tarot card reading, is that really bad news? The answer, interestingly enough, is no. What I find to be true, especially when you start looking at the tarot as a series, a 78-part series of descriptions of energetic experiences that humans run into. Is the energetic experience that we name Nine of Swords always going to be negative? No. It's just that in our culture, in our civilization, in our time, we have such an enormous amount of power in communication. Look at our communicative devices. Look at how little we have to do with our bodies below our neckline compared to our ancestors. In other words, many less of us, many fewer. Is that a good way of saying that? I suppose so, yeah. There are a lot less of us these days that actually have to work with our bodies doing some sort of manual task every day as an occupation than was true for our ancestors. A lot of us work with our heads, a lot of us work with communication, a lot of us work with our voices or our minds or our ideas. And this head space career trajectory, I suppose, that we see humanity on is giving sword energy, air energy, communication energy, a lot more power in today's world than was necessarily afforded to it in the past. Usually in the past, if people had to communicate with words, something had gone wrong from the balance, the norm, the harmony. Now, today, we are evolving as civilization, we are evolving as humanity. And the important thing to realize vibrationally about the Nine of Swords is that ultimately, this is an amazing image from Alexandra Janetti's deck. By the way, everyone, I just put an alternative Nine of Swords on the board from the Wheel of Change Tarot. The alternative here is to find a positive expression of nine-ness and a positive expression of communicative energy. When can that be helpful? In loads of different ways. A nine is essentially just an accumulation of energy, a very powerful, empowering communication of energy that actually shifts things. Here on Janetti's Nine of Swords, we see wind turbines. So these things are actually pulling and converting energy from air into a force that actually yields a lot of, it really powers our world. It powers our devices. It powers everything that makes our modern lives go, if we let it. So is this a negative image? No, it's actually a very empowering image. Sometimes the most powerful shifts that humanity has ever made come, sadly, sometimes out of necessity, out of a Nine of Swords experience, even if that experience isn't positive in of itself. Some of the biggest shifts for humanity come out of those moments, even if those moments anger us. I bet you any money, actually, at some point in the past, whoever created these beautiful wind turbines in this picture got really angry. And I wouldn't doubt that there may have been some anger and frustration in that person's motivation to go and create wind turbines, to engineer green solutions to the planet's terrible problems stemming from fossil fuel use. So anger, frustration, getting to a point energetically where you can't sleep anymore, where you're holding your head in your hand because you're so worried or sorrowful about something, that's a lot of energy. And what it means is simply that now you are empowered enough to shift, to change something that absolutely cannot longer be tolerated. And in that moment, we shift into a positive empowerment of the experience of the Nine of Swords. So this energy that we are looking at here with the Nine of Swords, it really runs us through to about the full moon, and then we shift over to the experience of the next card in this sequence, which is the Ten of Swords, just to end up the zodiac month of Gemini. I'm going to talk about the Ten of Swords briefly, but I'm going to give everyone actually this affirmation. This affirmation comes from my Tarot Healing Guidebook, which is available to everyone who is interested enough to enroll for the Tarot for Beginners course that I've put together. You get the entire guidebook with 78 affirmations like this, one for each tarot card. So as you go through the course, as you go through the lectures, you also get signed up for a masterclass series I'm running this year when you come in today as well. You get this guidebook. You can download the entire 78 card guidebook, and an affirmation like this for each card can help you through the experiences of any of the vibrations of just human experience that you're going through in any moment. This is a really good one for a lot of people right now, taken from the Tarot Healing Guidebook. It is this: I acknowledge that enough is enough and decide to put an end to the false ideas that torment me once and for all. I acknowledge that enough is enough and decide to put an end to the false ideas that torment me once and for all. Now, with this card and the next one thing that just as I repeated that affirmation just now, I do a lot of healing work with people that I do readings for, and that healing work, just from my background as a yoga teacher as well, it sometimes comes and kind of shifts and does its work while I am speaking the affirmations that I create for the tarot archetypes. I just feel very compelled to say right now, I just got a hit for my little community here in northern Arizona. Something very tragic just happened here in our community. We actually had, it's a very small community, and we had a suicide, a very public suicide. That woman ended up in front of a train, unfortunately, here in Flagstaff. And this is just a really, really sad occurrence. But what is really occurring to me also is that the energies of this particular time period had a lot to do with this, because we found out later, in fact this story is just breaking in the papers here today, the reason for her suicide had a lot to do with an experience she had when she was at war, I believe in Iraq. This memory, this idea, this false idea of anything that comes up, especially for veterans at this time. I find a lot of veterans commit suicide at this time of year. We have Memorial Day weekend occurring in this same span, just back about a week or so ago. There we had this at the beginning of our Nine of Swords period. And so here we have this theme that if we don't have a positive affirmation, if we don't have a positive way to shift our vibration into doing good here, a lot of tragedy can happen, and we just saw that in London as well. So from this time, I got the idea, of course, to just make this week's masterclass as public and as free as I could. I hope it's been helpful for you guys. And I'm going to give you a little bit about the Ten of Swords period, which is the 10-day or so period that comes right from the full moon onwards, up until the 9th or 10th, the 20th or 21st, the end of Gemini. We are experiencing the Ten of Swords as the energy that we connect with that next period. This is actually more final. It's completion, it's ending. And even though the word there on the Thoth Tarot on this first image is ruin, and we see a ship sinking in the Old English Tarot in the middle, and the left-hand side card image there from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is just, it's one of the most well-known tarot card images because it just looks awful, doesn't it? It looks gruesome. What this is all saying is something needs to end. Something needs to, with a lot of finality, close. A conflict needs to be over and done. One thing that I found really interesting is I was doing a little bit of research this week on sinking ships because of the image here on the Old English Tarot, was that we have a lot of sunken ships off the coast of the United Kingdom that belonged to Germans in World War II. And the reason why all of their craft are sunk off our coast is because they were advancing on us when the Allied forces actually claimed victory and ended the war. And rather than risk the conflict being even more complicated by giving the Allied soldiers the technology of the ships themselves, which were actually quite technologically advanced for their time, the captain of that ship just decided to sink the entire fleet. So sinking of millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of intelligence, just so that the whole ordeal could be completely finished. There was nothing hanging over. There was complete closure. Once that conflict was done, it was done. And I think there's a real lesson there metaphorically for the ending of any conflict like this. When we come to so that the period after the full moon here is going to be a period where I want you guys to focus on some of these images that I just put on the screen. These are some images from some of the more empowering, positive tarot card decks. And these are the images that actually can help you to see the vibrational lift that is possible and the peace that is there for us to obtain when we leave a conflict in the past, when we actually have the courage to end something, like the flock of geese we see ascending. Maybe they're flying south for the winter in the Gaian Tarot there in the center image. What we find is we're leaving an entire scenario behind, and as we rise from the scenario, of course, we get this beautiful widened perspective on our world, and we're able to lift vibrationally beyond the conflict with that ending. So these are also Ten of Swords vibrations, and you can see the difference there in the ways of thinking and feeling about the energy of this tarot key. So in the left-hand side of this slide, for instance, let's just talk about that image too. That's the Connolly Tarot over there. And we see a woman's figure, and she's got this really bright aura around her, right? And I actually haven't read too much about this card. But the swords seem to be moving away from her body. They're not aimed at her. The handles are aimed at her, which sort of empowers her to use those swords to her advantage, and they seem to be parting, and her aura is very powerful. So this may be a sort of a risen, renewed, energetic self after a conflict is ended or closed. So the window of opportunity here coming up for the 10-day period, starting with the full moon, ending at the end of the zodiac month of Gemini later this month, we have this opportunity for empowerment for ourselves due to making decisions to end conflict, especially mental, communicative, air sign conflict. Just for interest's sake, this is the third of Alexandra Genetti's Wheel of Change Tarot cards that I've highlighted in today's masterclass over on the right-hand side here. And we see this tool shed with sharp scythes and instruments that help us to garden being displayed on this card. And they're sitting in this potting shed. And now, the interesting thing about this image for me is the door of this potting shed has swung open, and outside the door is the planet Uranus. So it's a really interesting, surreal image. The reason that Genetti has chosen to put the planet Uranus on this card is really interesting. And I want you to just receive a little bit of what she says about this imagery. I'm just going to read her words in a companion guide that she has for this card, because I think this is a really nice energetic solution for the energies of closing, to bring this enlightening energy to this experience. Here's what she says. She says, the brick path in this card represents the journey of life and the structures that we have created along the way. The tools and objects surrounding it are the events and needs that we have in our life. The little garden shed is the arena of our life, and at the end of our journey, we look through the door into death. The final sword in our life is the sickle of death, which we trip over as we leave the security of the house of life. So it was just a really interesting take on the finality and the symbolism that she chose to use there, and I just thought that was a really interesting thought to just kind of close up the master class today. Finally, I'm also going to give you the second affirmation from the Tarot Healing Guidebook that I promised you guys. Thanks for sticking around until the very end of today's masterclass. I hope you got a lot out of it. This might be a useful affirmation for you from about full moon on to the end of Gemini. It's the affirmation that I created for the Ten of Swords energy from the Tarot Healing Guidebook, and it is, I accept the necessity of endings and let go of any conflict that has troubled me in the past. I accept the necessity of endings and let go of any conflict that has troubled me in the past. Okay, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's masterclass. I wanted to also just really quickly mention that we do have a special offer this week. If you'd like to learn more about the fascinating archetypes of the tarot with me, Laura, I do have a complete online Tarot for Beginners course that's available in 16 individual lessons, individual video classes that you click play on, just like this one. And we have the class available for you on instant access. You get lifetime access to the links to all of the parts of this course too when you enroll here today. And you can get started and work your way through that course as soon as you're ready. It's really all on your own time because it's video based, but originally I designed the Tarot for Beginners course that I've put for sale here as a weekend immersion workshop in the tarot that would take people from absolute beginner's knowledge, knowing nothing about the archetypes of the tarot, to understanding all of these patterns in the tarot and the patterns of story and number that are actually quite easy to grasp in just an hour or two. And over the course of a weekend, just by understanding some basic patterns of number and symbol and suit and story that we find in the tarot, a working knowledge of the tarot emerges. And because the knowledge is there from story, our brain magically remembers it without any memorization. So that after you've taken this weekend immersion workshop, you're literally going to be able to pick up and work with any tarot deck that you like. The same 78 archetypal images occur in any tarot deck in the world. This course also, at the end of this course, it doesn't just leave off with meanings ascribed to each of these cards, although it gives you that without needing to memorize, because we study these patterns, and you'll find a lot of them feel very familiar to you. And the tarot is really unique in how universal it really is that way. But in addition to all of that, at the end of Tarot for Beginners, I do dive into some reading techniques that I like my students to have to begin exploring the practice of tarot reading, both for themselves and for other people. So at the end of the Tarot for Beginners course, you also get instruction on how to do 3 different kinds of tarot readings. And you can practice these for yourself and other people. Again, it's about the length of time of basically a weekend immersion workshop, but you have lifetime access to all 16 components of the Tarot for Beginners course when you enroll today, and you have those links with you instantly as well. So you can go through it at your own pace, on your own schedule. It's all there for you. Now, if you enroll with me this week, I'm also going to give everyone who gets the Tarot for Beginners course with me this week the complete Destiny Discovery package. And we're doing both the Tarot for Beginners course and the Destiny Discovery package, which is a package of personal readings with me and assessments and master classes that you can go into a lot of detail for yourself on specific tarot energies that are going to be incredibly powerful for you personally, not just because you're going to get a reading with me included here, a complete Celtic cross reading, which is a 10-card reading, is included here for you with me when you order this today, but you also get to go through 2 master workshops where you are going to calculate your destiny keys. These are a couple or maybe even 3 keys from the tarot, key energies that you'll find described in 2 or 3 of the 78 tarot cards that specifically connect to the numerology surrounding your birthday. And when you understand your destiny keys, you get a level and a depth of understanding about your life and about your life purpose. And you get a master class that explains all of that to you, as well as the simple computation. So that's a really neat thing that's included in the Destiny Discovery package, along with that 10-card reading from me personally for you. You also get another assessment in there called the personality assessment, which is a quiz that you go through and you answer questions, and we come up with your key strength, your archetypal strength, and your archetypal key weakness. And we look at those and we factor those in just purely based off the results of your personality assessment. And then there's a masterclass for that too. All of that's in the Destiny Discovery package with that complete personal Celtic Cross reading with me for you. So in addition to the weekend workshop experience, you get the entire Destiny Discovery package of readings and assessments there. All of this together, two for the price of one. Usually I'm selling both of these for $97 individually. If you get them both here together today, you're just going to pay $97 total for both of these combined. So if you want to order now, you should be able to scroll below this video. You should be able to read a little bit more detail in black and white on the page below this video if you would like to review what we have here in a little more detail. And somewhere on the bottom of this page you should see a button to click through and purchase this today for $97. I am going to have to limit this to the first 25 to snap this up, just because of those personal readings that are included here with me for you when you purchase this course. So do go ahead, and if you see the buy now button on the page below this video, go ahead and put your order through as soon as you're able to. If you don't find a buy now button on this page, it means that we do have our 25 enrollments this week already. It's definitely a first come first serve basis, so I encourage everyone who would like to take advantage of this to get their order in as soon as possible. I'd love to have you on board and read for you and explore the tarot further with you. It truly has transformed my life. Thank you so much for joining me in the masterclass today, and have a wonderful week. Take care now.